Hello, welcome to Spotlight, bringing a ray of hope to the end of another long winter.
Spotlight, brought to you by the Isle of Man Arts Council.
This evening, as promised, we do indeed catch up with a couple of cast members in this coming weekend's production of Ravers, the National Youth Theatre Connections play being performed at Kensington Arts, or KA. Drop down to the airport to see and hear about the In Exile photographic exhibition, and hear about a fascinating new book detailing the role of the steam packet in the last war. Remember, do get in touch with any creative artistic endeavours you might be involved in, planning, hoping to create, or would really like to put in the spotlight. Poetic, theatrical, musical, literary, ceramic, sculpture, drag, film, mime, social media, digital, calligraphy, of course. Why not? Drop me a line, howardkane@manxradio.com, Kane with an E, or spotlight@manxradio.com. Love to hear from you. Love to feature you even more on the programme. Can't do it unless you get in touch and let me know what's going on. Now, if you've been through Ronaldsway Airport recently, you might have had a chance to have a quick look at the current photographic exhibition on display. In Exile features a selection of stunning and thought-provoking photographs from independent photographer Vincent Tremont, who's been chronicling the stories of refugees and displaced people for the past 10 years. I met up with Wendy Shimon from the One World Centre, who put on the display, following on from the success of Vincent's exhibition at the airport last year entitled One Day I Will. On the rather noisy upper level of the airport, just around by the atrium there, we walked around the photos, and I put it to Wendy that the theme of the exhibition was very much one of our times.
Exactly. So the latest statistics we have from the UN, which relate from about April 2024, there was an estimate there was 120 million refugees around the world at that time, and increasing all the while. Obviously, we know about some of the bigger conflicts, but there's loads of disputes going on in Central Africa as well that don't get any time in air news. And some of the photographs here people might be quite surprised about. I sort of tried to pick from a wide range, and we have pictures, for example, of Venezuelans trying to flee Venezuela, crossing a river. There's a picture of a chap holding a child, the kind of pictures that we associate with the English Channel perhaps, but it's just to show that this is going on around the world. It's not just the places that we hear in the news all the time.
It's very easy to feel sheltered from some of the conflicts going around the world, living on the Isle of Man, I guess, because it's, we're insular, we're a pretty safe community to be in. People here will be travelling, and they will be travelling all over the world quite often. And I suppose it sort of brings it home, I guess, when people are sort of heading off from the island.
Exactly. I think most people coming through airport are taking a journey mostly through choice. Perhaps it might be for work or study as well. But we are masters of our own destiny, and we've chosen to get on this plane and go somewhere. Whereas the people in these photographs have had no such choice. They have fled for their lives, basically. Many of them are just displaced for years and years, always hoping to go home, but never sure whether they're going to reach it.
Let's just take a look while we're here at 1 or 2. We sort of step inside, and we just come over to the left here. An unknown woman with her grandchildren in Kananga, Democratic Republic of Congo. That seems to be a part of the world which is in constant strife and comes and goes depending on how the rest of the world is doing it, whether it's been sort of dominated by Ukraine and other thing, but Congo seems to be in constant issues.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And this photograph, the lady's wearing some fabulously coloured clothes, which is direct contrast to the sort of hut that she's living in, which is very bare and Spartan. And again, Vincent's photos just bring these contrasts to you and make you think, well, what is life like there?
This is one, I looked at it immediately and almost thought of a sort of a nativity scene or something, but it's a silhouette, very striking silhouette of children at play.
Yeah, the point is that life goes on. Even people who are in these sort of wretched places, these are children playing. One's got a tambourine, some other are chucking dice around. They're children, that they're just playing as you would, but they're in a sort of very tatty, but they are in a tent, a UNICEF named tent. And yeah, you just kind of think, what's life like? There's another photo actually of some teenagers all clustered round a mobile phone. They're watching a football game. And I chose that. You do get teenagers all over the world looking at, like, normally they have their own phones. There's not 20 of them all around one phone. But again, people maybe wouldn't associate a refugee camp in Brazil. That's not something you would think about.
And how did you go about choosing? You were saying that it must have been fairly difficult to narrow it down to a small selection.
It was terrible hard. I tried to have different locations, different ages, and just different feelings as well. I mean, there's one here called The Bond, which is a family reuniting. They are still displaced, they are still in a refugee camp. But the son had been missing for a year, and so there's hope and joy there as well. So I was trying to show all the emotions that you might have in somewhere like a refugee camp.
Behind you, I think, was the one you were talking about, which is the, could be in any case, the journey, people fleeing Venezuela. Yes, the one you mentioned, risk a river crossing to reach Colombia, and yeah, it is a man holding his daughter by the looks of it, just wearing his shorts or jogging bottoms and wading through what looks like fairly fast flowing water, and it is that sort of sense of desperation just to find somewhere where all you really want to do is to get somewhere where you can live your lives.
Exactly, it's that danger. There's lots of misconceptions and confusion between migrants and refugees. But these people are clearly, they're risking the lives of their children, so they feel it's that desperate that they need to move. It's something I think we find very hard to understand. There's another one just around the corner as well, a more recent one of a child from Ukraine crossing over to Moldova. Who's just standing here holding a teddy bear, which is probably one of the few things that she was able to take with her. And again, that's closer to home perhaps for a lot of people. But it just shows the scale of the problem around the world.
It really is worth a look if you've got a few minutes to kill when next down at the airport. If nothing else, it will make you realise how fortunate we are to be living where we are in the world. The exhibition is free, it's on display until early March.
Spotlight, brought to you by the Isle of Man Arts Council.
Kensington Arts' production of Ravers, their play for this year's National Theatre Connections programme, takes place this coming weekend. Performances on Friday night, Saturday matinee and Saturday evening. The play, by Ricky Beadle-Blair, follows a group of socially awkward youngsters as they attempt to hold their own rave in order to try and be seen as normal and socially accepted by their peers. What could possibly go wrong? We spoke to Assistant Director Ben Gale last week, and we should have had cast members Sally Ann and Millie on as well, but due to a lack of professionalism, that's on my part, not theirs, this didn't happen. So, here they are.
Hi, I'm Sally Ann, and I play Taylor.
I'm Millie, and I play Robin.
And we're at KA, catching up with the girls ahead of the opening night of Ravers. Now, first off, just tell us a little bit about your characters. What's yours?
So Taylor is quite a bad influence who likes a bit of a drink and doesn't really want to go to Ravers at first because thinks it's, not cool. Eventually gets there and realises it is a bit cool, yeah.
And yours?
Robin, she's sort of like the sidekick to Ali, who's the organiser of the rave. So the two of them sort of go about planning this whole rave, and then some things go awry, but they bring it back together.
What's been the most challenging part, do you think, for you with your character in this piece?
Probably just like understanding what all her lines meant. Not necessarily meant, but just like why they were there and why they were important, and like what my role meant to the other characters around me.
And what about you? Is it something, can you sort of relate to your character?
I can relate to my character, definitely. Yeah, it's quite difficult because the scene that I'm in before the rave is we've got a lot of people, like the most people in the scene, so there's 5 people, and it's trying to figure out movement without making it look too busy or too crowded, and also playing drunk realistically. That's quite difficult.
So, I mean, is that what you, because some people might say, well, yeah, what is a rave or what are ravers? How would you describe them?
Well, normal rave or a nerd rave?
Oh, either, both.
Well, a rave is, about dancing, music, lights, seeing other people and, interacting as a sort of a social event. With the nerd rave that we're doing, it's no drinking. So it's like more being yourself without, things to block that or filters, things like that, yeah.
And are you familiar with the concept of the nerd rave?
I can't say I've ever been to a nerd rave. I am a bit of a nerd myself, though. So I do get the awkwardness and the idea of wanting to socialise not being as easy when it actually comes to it. Yeah.
And what about the piece itself? Because I think there's a pretty large cast.
Yeah, the largest cast I think they've had in a while. So 22, but 21 now? Is that right? Something like that. Literally just over 20. Quite a big cast, but everyone's getting along really well, so it's nice. And there's a large range in ages, so it's like you get to speak to someone here, someone there, different schools. It's really nice.
Okay, and so is it sort of, would you call it, are there any sort of star roles, or is it much more of a sort of collective piece?
Everyone has their own bit, so there's a scene before the rave happens that everyone is in, so they each get their own scene with a couple of other people, and they basically get to put their stories forward, and the audience gets to know their character specifically before, the rave. So everyone's got their own part, but there are a couple of characters with maybe more lines, bigger monologues, maybe bigger stories. Yeah.
And what about, have you got a lot on the line front, or is it sort of middling, or how do you feel about him?
I think my character has less lines, but more personality. I think a big personality character, yeah.
And that's sometimes the hardest thing. We were just saying that before we started recording, and that I think when you're acting and we are on stage, it's one thing if you're the person or the actor, actress saying the lines. I often think one of the hardest things to do and do well is actually act when you've got nothing to say or do, as it were.
Yeah, definitely. That's been one of our biggest challenges, actually, because the second half of the show is everyone's together at the rave all of a sudden. And so you have a line every now and then, but the biggest challenge is getting everyone to be doing something interesting all the time so that the audience's eye isn't, wandering to the person zoning out in the corner. And
you're right, it's so easy. If you stop concentrating, you just end up just sort of standing there, not really being in character anymore.
Definitely. There's been a couple of times where that's happened, but I think we're coming together now. We're figuring out what we're doing and what our sub-stories are. So, yeah, it's good.
And what do you enjoy about acting?
I've always loved putting myself in other people's shoes. So pretending to be someone else, I almost take a bit of that character away with me as well. I just love, getting out of my own headspace and into someone else's. Yeah.
And had you done much acting before this? Because you both sound pretty confident.
Yeah, I've always loved acting. I do small things. I've never done something as big as this. I've done a Kensington Arts show twice now. I'm too old to do any of the junior ones now.
No, surely not.
Yeah, 17. We'll be 18 in March. But yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I've done quite a bit. Not quite a bit. A lot of amateur acting. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing it since I was very little, just like little drama clubs and things. And I participate a lot at school, do Lambda, and yeah.
And then coming towards the performance times we are now, with this work just going on to sort of build the set in KA Theatre now, is that when you get, I mean, I don't know, when do you sort of start getting the butterflies? Is it when you're actually literally in the wings ready to go on, or is it once you think, oh, this is real now?
Yeah, this is Tech Week now, so it gets proper serious now. Every time we do it, we get feedback. It's more strict as well, so you got to be on it, because we should be a show now. So if we're not, we got to really work hard to get to that. Yeah.
And do you get butterflies? Do you think it helps, or do you think would you rather not have them before you go on?
Yeah, I think the butterflies do help. I had a teacher in school, one of my favourite teachers, who always said turn the nervous energy into excited energy. So all the energy that you've got built up, just release it on stage. And so I always try to do that. So I think the butterflies are good for that. Obviously, you don't want to be so butterflies that you're sick or anything, but a good amount, I think.
And then the exciting thing with the NT scheme here is that, yes, you'll do the performance here in the space you're familiar with, but then, of course, you then take it away to Scotland and go to basically sort of take it on not quite a tour, but you certainly go to a theatre which will be completely different.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm really excited about that. I feel like that's a completely new experience. And getting to, see, I've never been to Scotland before, that's where we're going. So it'll be really nice to see, what kind of stage we're on as well. And, yeah.
And I think in some cases, if you sort of, I don't quite know how it works, but again, I know certainly in the past they've gone, if you're sort of picked, you could end up going down to London and actually doing it down at the National Theatre.
Yeah. So there's 10 plays every year, and I think one of each 10 gets picked. So if you're the version of your play that gets picked, then yeah, you go to London in July-ish, I think, and you perform there at the Dorf.
And that would be, I just think that would be an amazing experience.
Yeah, it would be awesome. Yeah, I would be really stoked to go. But, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed indeed. And just finally, looking forwards, have you got either anything else coming up on the acting scene, either here or elsewhere? And where would you want to go with your acting? Is it something that you want to keep it sort of at an amateur level, doing something with local societies or societies in the UK or something? Or do either of you want or intend to take it further?
I don't intend to do it as a job. I'm quite happy with the job I've got now. But I'm doing Port St Mary pantomime. It's a very small thing. I'm being pushed to audition at the Gaiety by some of my family members, my boyfriend's family members especially. But yeah, I'd like to make it a little bit bigger than what I'm doing now. But I'm happy for fun. It's less pressure as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm doing Matilda the musical at my school, King William's College, and. Yeah, other than that, not much. I'm also being pressured to audition for Gaiety stuff by my family. But we'll see. Probably not acting as a career, but I definitely like to keep doing it as I get older.
Excellent. And either of you been on the Gaiety stage before?
No, I have not, but...
Never, but my sister has a lot. She's
Okay.
really good, yeah.
Well, there you go. I think you should do it. It's got to do it as an experience in any case. Listen, best of luck. Break a leg, we should say, for this one. And we hope you get cracking audiences and enjoy Scotland and hopefully get down to the National Theatre.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And whilst I was there, I grabbed a word with Creative Development Coordinator at KA, Emma Goodson, about the NT Connections programme itself, which sees youth drama groups up and down the country taking part in a veritable festival of new drama.
Yeah, we've been part of the programme for 10 years now. Obviously, before it was Kensington Arts, it was the Youth Arts Centre, but we've continued on with the programme because it's such a fantastic project and such a great opportunity for the young people on the Isle of Man that are interested in theatre. And the programme itself, the National Theatre, which is based in London, that's been going on for 30 years. They've got their 30th anniversary this year, so it's all very exciting.
And the great thing is, obviously, they get to do brand new pieces, and I think this is part of the whole sort of ethos of Connections, and that it's always a new work that won't really have been performed before.
Yeah, that's right. So each year the National Theatre commission 10 new plays. So this will be the first time that anyone has seen these plays performed by the young people.
Which is, I think, added excitement. If you're doing something which has never been seen before, then in a way you can put your own mark on it, as opposed to something, like the Mousetrap, which is going for 40 years, or something which has been done thousands of times before. You've got a blank canvas to work on.
Yeah, that's true. And it's also interesting to see how the other theatre groups kind of interpret the new plays as well. So when the groups go across to perform, they often get the opportunity to watch performances by other theatre groups that are based in the UK as well. And they can, be really different sometimes. So that's always very interesting.
But of course, it is performed here at KA first and foremost, and a chance for a Manx audience to come and see what's been going on, enjoy the play, see the young actors and actresses, and as we often say, some of them from KA have gone on to great things afterwards, of course. So if people want to come and see it, how can they do that?
Yes, so please come and see the play. I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's a brilliant performance. The young people have put in a lot of effort, and it's really, a fantastic production. You can get tickets on our website, kensingtonarts.im, and they are £8 for adults and £5 for under 16s. So, and just to say though, to add to that, there are some sort of adult themes in there, so it's kind of 13 is the age recommendation, but obviously that's up to parental discretion. I'm sure other youngsters can come along as well and they'll be fine.
And then again, we mentioned with Ben, but once they've done it here, it also will be performed over in Scotland, if you happen to be up in the north of Britain.
Yeah, so our partner theatre this year is Pitlochry Festival Theatre, which is in mid or northern Scotland. So yeah, quite the journey we'll be taking as well, which is really exciting. We haven't been partnered with them before, so it will be a great trip and new experience for everyone.
Get your tickets now. The cast look really strong. Dave Dawson, Ben and the team, very committed and talented. It's a great venue. We should all support live theatre when we can. To finish this week, something more historical. We're all familiar with the crucial role the Isle of Man steam packet play in the lives of those who live here on the island. But how much do you know about the packet's role in World War II? That's the theme of the latest in a long line of fascinating readable history tomes from local historian and prolific writer Matthew Richardson. When I called down to meet up with him at the Manx Museum, I asked how his latest title had come about.
Like a lot of books, this has had a very long gestation period. A lot of my books, I pick them up and I put them down and come back to them over a long period of time as more information comes to light. And this is a particular case in point because I first tried to get this book published in 2010, which was the 70th anniversary of Dunkirk. I did a lot of research on the steam packet at Dunkirk then. I was very interested in the ships, the way the Manx ships took part, rescued so many servicemen. When people talk about the little ships, the fishing boats, that's not the true story of Dunkirk. That was propaganda that was put out at the time. The real heavy lifting at Dunkirk was done by the ships of the Merchant Navy, and the Isle of Man steam packet played probably the most significant part of any Merchant Navy fleet in the rescue of Dunkirk. But it's almost lost from history. It's been completely obliterated by this national myth of the little ships. So I wanted to set that story straight, but I was stymied because I found out that there was a very important report in the Isle of Man Public Record Office about allegations that had been made at the time that the steam packet ships had refused to sail. This was a very controversial thing at the time, and I felt I couldn't publish the book while this report was still closed. So I tried to get permission in 2010, didn't manage it. And a number of years went by. And then I was fortunate that Dave Neal, a local historian based on the island, Dave Neal was more successful than I was and managed to get access to this report, which it turned out had been prepared for Lord Granville. And it really lifted the lid on these false accusations about the steam packet ships refusing to sail, because it turned out that across the board, ships had refused to go back once it became obvious that the danger was so great. There was no protection from air attack, there was no protection from the Royal Navy. So the steam packet were unfairly singled out. And it turned out that Lord Granville, being a big important figure in the establishment, the Navy were very frightened that word would get back to him about their poor performance in defending the merchant ships. So a false report was cooked up which painted the steam packet ships in a bad light. And it was only when this report was available that I felt I got enough material to produce the book. So although it's a book that covers the whole experience of the steam packet fleet throughout the Second World War, the central plank of it is about the experience at Dunkirk, what it was actually like to be there, which ships carried which troops, and how this sort of slur came about and how it was later refuted.
So do you think that the steam packet's role in the Second World War has been sort of massively underplayed over the years? Do you think it's one of the larger contributions perhaps the island made to World War II?
I think it's the major contribution that the Isle of Man made. The role of the Merchant Navy in the Second World War generally is little understood. You know, there aren't that many films about what it's like to be on an Atlantic convoy. It was grim, it was unglamorous, but it was absolutely vital. And Churchill said the Battle of the Atlantic was the only part of the war that really worried him, because that was the point in which the Germans came closest to starving Britain out. And the role of the merchant fleets generally has never really been fully appreciated. And for the Isle of Man, the biggest single contribution that we made to the war effort was in having this fleet of ships that was so invaluable in wartime, in carrying troops, not just at Dunkirk but on D-Day as well. They made a massive contribution on D-Day, and that's reflected in the book as well.
And again, you do get a flavour of just what it was like, and the bottom line is it was absolutely terrifying as far as I can see.
It was very, very dangerous. You're in a merchant ship, you're not armed, you're subject to all the dangers that face a warship, you know, mines, air attack, all these things, but without having any. And this is what merchant sailors used to say. They kept getting told by the authorities that they were civilians, so they weren't entitled to any of the protection, you know, that the Royal Navy had.
And would they have any armaments on board at all to try and defend themselves?
Only later in the war, at D-Day, were some of the ships given protection. But in the early part of the war, Dunkirk, this is one of the things that the Manx sailors complained about. They were expected to go into Dunkirk with no protection at all. when they eventually decided that they had enough of this, the Royal Navy took over the ships, and the first thing it did was put machine guns on board. So the Royal Navy weren't prepared to take the ships into Dunkirk unarmed, but they were expecting the merchant sailors to do that. So it's one of the iniquities of the whole thing.
It is a fascinating read. I've been dipping into it for the last week or two. Just finally, is it surprising that, I mean, there's been lots written about the Isle of Man during World War II, but as far as we know, or as far as I know, certainly hitherto to this volume, there's been nothing concentrating, as you say, on the steam packet's particular role.
There have been bits and pieces published over the years. It's been there have been a few books on various anniversaries and things like that. But what I've tried to do is produce something that pulls everything together, that covers all the ships throughout the whole war. So it gives a sort of comprehensive overview of every ship. And I think I hope I'd like to think that I found things that other authors haven't managed to find. So there's a few little tidbits in there that I found in obscure newspapers published in other parts of the country. For example, I found a report on the Mona's Isle when she was stationed up in Newcastle that was published in a Newcastle newspaper. I don't think that's ever seen the light of day before. So hopefully, even if people are steam packet aficionados, and I know there are quite a lot out there, hopefully I might have found one or two bits that even they haven't seen.
Is this years of research we're talking about to sort of pull all this together?
Oh, yeah, undoubtedly. I mean, a lot of my books, it takes at least 10 or maybe more years to bring everything together, and this one's no exception. As I say, I started in 2010, so it's taken 15 years to get to this point. It's not sort of something that I do overnight.
It's a fascinating read. I've been dipping in, haven't read it from cover to cover yet, but there's always fascinating snippets wherever you open it, and it fills in yet another little piece of a story from the chaos which was the last war. It's published by Pen and Sword Military. That's about it for this week. I'll be back next week, of course, when hopefully we'll be going all Shakespearean, amongst other things. See you then, and whatever you're doing, be creative about it. Himo.